Hello, and welcome to the Poem of the Week. My name, as I'm sure you know, is Walt White Sockman, and I am your host. This week, we have a truly transformative poem for you by the original quarantining champion of the world, Emily Dickinson. Come on out, Emily. No. Oh, come on now. We practiced. We talked about this. You said you'd be fine if we were 6 feet apart, and we are. Believe me, I'm a sock. If I know anything, it's feet. We are both socks, Walter. And you look like it has been more than a moment since your last trip to the laundromat. There are reasons that I stayed in my room so much that people began to think I was a ghost, or maybe even a myth. Reasons? Such as because people bored and intimidated me. Some people choose the social recluse life. For some, though, the social recluse life chooses us. I was a little bit of both. Well, I like to think of you as a trendsetter. Social distancing before it was cool. Social distancing is an absolute paradise compared to the tedium of dealing with other people. I'd rather sit through Cats the movie back to back to back by myself than have to make small talk. Other people are mind-numbing, but being alone with my thoughts, oh, what depth, what layers, what room for transformation. Well, I'll have to disagree with you on that, Em, but that's a talk for another day. Speaking of transformation, though, that brings us to our poem for this week, From the Chrysalis, by you, Emily Dickinson. Well, actually, Walt, while in both looks and personality, I may strangely resemble Miss Dickinson. For copyright reasons, on this program, I am Emily Stockington. But yes, it is a lovely poem. Ah, of course. Before we get too far into the poem, how about you tell us about the title? Now, most of your poems don't have titles, do they? True. I titled almost none of my poems because I didn't write them for other people. I wrote them for me. In fact, when I died, I left strict instructions for my sister Lavinia to destroy all of my writings. Clearly, she listened as well in my death as she did in my life. Oh dear. Well, I'm sorry your deathbed wishes were ignored, but I'm glad that the world didn't lose your poetry. But you were telling us about the title? Right. It is called From the Chrysalis. A chrysalis, of course, is another name for the transformational stage of insects, particularly as things like caterpillars turn into butterflies. They're also often called cocoons. Ah, so right off the bat, you're cluing the reader in that this poem is about transformation and change. Well, why don't you read it through for us once and for all the way through, and then we can go through it slower and analyze it. Well, aren't you going to look at the poem? Read it. Walter, I wrote the poem. I hardly think I need to look at it. From the Chrysalis, by Emily Dickinson. My cocoon tightens, colors tease. I'm feeling for air. A dim capacity for wings degrades the dress I wear. A power of butterflies must be the aptitude to fly. Meadows of majesty concedes and easy sweeps of sky. So I must baffle at the hint, and cipher at the sign, and make much blunder, if at last I take the clue divine. Oh, wow. Now that is lovely. Butterflies and transformation make for beautiful imagery. Would you like to talk us through it a little bit slower? If I must. Let's start with the first stanza. In the first lines, I give an image of some of the discomfort that can come from some of the changes by talking about the tightening of the cocoon and the desperate search for air. After that, I explore a little bit more the growing pains that can come with transformation by talking about the dim capacity that I have for wings, which destroys what I'm currently in. Change is tough. It's uncomfortable, but that's okay. Fair point. We all tend to constantly be in a state of becoming rather than being one thing and then changing and being another. Interesting thing about this stanza, though, is that right in the middle of it, all that discomfort is the tease of colors. the pop of hope that keeps us becoming. Not bad analysis, Walt. In the next stanza, though, I do move away from the idea of becoming and into what I hope to become, in this case, a butterfly. The second stanza explores the idea that we're transforming into something that has power and aptitude so great that even the forces of nature, like majestic meadows and sweeps of sky, help and are at the service of them. Well, that's an empowering thought. When we finally reach the end of our becoming and start becoming something else, we have the power of nature that's on our side. Also, I liked the use of alliteration in meadows of majesty and sweeps of sky. I'm glad you picked up on what I was doing there, Walt. The last stanza is where I really start to marry the big idea from the first stanza with the idea from the second stanza. I explore the idea that difficulties don't ever really stop. I discuss being baffled at the hints of what is happening and having to make a cipher or a code to figure it all out. But eventually, I'll receive a clue from the divine to make it all worth it. Now, Emily, I noticed that you spelled clue, C-L-E-W, instead of C-L-U-E, how it's usually spelled. Any particular reason for that, or are you just a poor speller? Oh, Walter, I'm so impressed with you until now. A clue, spelt C-L-E-W, does not mean a hint, but rather a ball of string. This ball of string in particular is referring to the myth of the Minotaur and Theseus, of course. The story of how in ancient Crete the king kept a half-man, half-bull monster called a Minotaur in a cave called the Labyrinth, where he would ritualistically sacrifice Athenian girls to remind the people that he was the one in charge. That is, until one day Theseus came along and destroyed the Minotaur with the help of a clue that was, or a ball of string from his king's daughter. He was able to slay the beast and then leave the labyrinth safely. There you are. So, by using the image of Theseus from the divine, I drive home the final idea that if we can push through the initial discomfort of transformation, that great obstacles can be overcome, and fate, God, the universe, or whatever you believe in will come to your aid. Wow, Em. You put an awful lot into just 12 lines. I guess that brings us to a close, but here are some questions for you to think about. What kind of changes or transformations are you going through in your life? What are some of the difficulties in that? Triumphs? Who do you have to help you transform? Well, that does it for us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week for Poem of the Week.